The doors of the most expensive venue in Seoul opened wide. This was the engagement party of the year. And walking through those open doors was the most feared man in Seoul. Kang Min-jun. The room shifted the moment he entered. There was no announcement. No dramatic pause in the music. Nothing so obvious. It was subtler than that, the way a cold wind moves through a room without anyone seeing where it came from. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. Eyes moved toward the entrance simultaneously, drawn by something that could not quite be named but could absolutely be felt. He walked forward without acknowledging a single person. Calm. Unbothered. Shoulders relaxed, jaw set, hands easy at his sides. The way a man walks when he has spent his entire life in rooms that were afraid of him and has long since stopped noticing. And right beside him was a woman nobody in that room recognized. Not Korean. Not connected to anyone inside. Not dressed like she had known she was walking into the event of the year. She wore something simple and presentable, neat, clean, put together, but entirely without the performance that every other guest had clearly spent hours preparing. She carried a bag over one shoulder. Her eyes moved across the room carefully, taking things in, missing nothing. She walked beside him like she belonged there completely. And she did not look at anyone for permission to feel that way. The whispers began immediately. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why did he bring her? Why is she here? Does anyone know her? Has anyone seen her before? At the front of the room, standing beside the man she had chosen, Yi-jin turned and saw them both walk through the door. Her smile stayed perfectly in place. But her eyes moved to the woman beside Kang Min-jun, stayed there for one quiet second, and something shifted behind them. Something small. Something she had not planned for. Something that was not supposed to be part of this evening at all. 30 minutes earlier, Adiz had arrived alone. She stepped out of the taxi with a small recorder in her bag, a notepad she had not touched in 3 weeks because everything she needed was already memorized, and a purpose sitting in her chest that had been burning steadily since the day a 17-year-old girl sat across from her and could not stop shaking her hands. She walked straight to the entrance. The two men at the door were built like furniture, wide, still, completely unmoved by anything the evening had brought them so far. They looked at her. Checked the list in their hands. Looked at her again. Your name is not here, the taller one said. I know, Adiz said. But I need to be inside. The men did not move. No entry without an invitation. Those are the rules for tonight. She did not argue. She did not explain herself. She did not try to reason with them or offer anything she did not have. She simply stepped to the side of the entrance and stood there. Thinking. Because she had not spent 3 weeks following a paper trail across 3 countries to be stopped by a door. She had not stayed up past midnight cross-referencing bank records, tracking shell companies, and verifying every single document by hand, alone, without a team, without anyone telling her she was right, to walk away because 2 men in suits said her name was not on a list. She was going inside that building. She just needed 30 more seconds to figure out how. Then a car pulled up directly behind her. Black. Expensive. The kind of vehicle that did not need to announce itself because everyone who mattered already knew what it meant. One door opened. A man stepped out. He straightened his jacket once, glanced at nothing in particular, and began walking toward the entrance with the kind of unhurried certainty that said the building was already his before he reached it. His eyes swept the entrance. Landed on the doormen. Then landed on her. Then moved to the expression on her face, the quiet, contained, completely undefeated expression of a woman standing outside a door she had every intention of walking through, and something in his eyes registered it. She's with me, he said, without stopping, without looking back, without breaking his stride for even half a second. The doormen stepped back immediately. No questions. No hesitation. No looking at the list again. They simply moved, the way people move when a name carries enough weight that arguing with it would be its own kind of mistake. Adiz picked up her bag. Fell into step beside him. "Thank you," she said quietly, because she was not a person who left things unsaid. He did not respond. But he did not walk ahead of her either. They entered the room together, the most feared man in Seoul and a Nigerian woman with a recorder in her bag, and the engagement party of the year welcomed them both without knowing what either of them had actually come for. They sat down beside each other at one of the long tables near the center of the room. Two complete strangers. Joined by nothing more than a door and a four-word sentence. Neither of them had planned this. Neither of them owed the other anything. And yet here they were, sitting close enough to speak quietly, surrounded by a room full of people who were watching them both without quite having the nerve to be obvious about it. Adiz placed her bag carefully under her chair. Adjusted it once so she knew exactly where it was. Then sat up straight and looked forward. Kang Min-jun straightened the front of his jacket. Rested one hand on the table. Said nothing. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then the music in the room changed. Something warmer, slower, designed to pull at something inside people. The guests turned in their seats. The crowd near the entrance parted. And Yi-jin and Choi Byung-soo walked in together. She moved through the room like she had rehearsed it, and maybe she had, because every step was exactly right. Her dress caught the light with each movement, something ivory and fitted that made the whole room seem like it had been decorated around her. Her hand rested on his arm lightly, confidently. Her smile was warm and open and completely believable. Choi Byung-soo walked beside her like a man who had just won something enormous and was not yet tired of knowing it. He looked down at her the way men look at things they are proud to own, with that particular mixture of affection and satisfaction that comes when the thing you wanted has finally, completely, become yours. The guests erupted. Applause broke across the room like a wave hitting shore, sudden, full, loud enough to fill every corner of the venue. People stood. Glasses rose. Some guests wiped their eyes, genuinely moved by what they were watching. The couple moved through the celebration slowly, stopping to embrace people, leaning in for words that couldn't be heard across the room, laughing at exactly the right moments. Everyone believed it. Every single person in that room was completely convinced that what they were watching was real, two people in love, one beautiful night, a future that would be exactly as good as this moment promised. Adiz watched Choi Byung-soo from across the room. Beside her, Kang Min-jun watched Yi-jin. His face did not change. Not one muscle moved in a way that gave anything away. But the hand resting on the table was still, too still, the kind of stillness that is not peace but is something just below it, something that has learned to wear peace like a coat. There are things about Kang Min-jun that Seoul knows and things that Seoul only suspects and things that only the people closest to him have ever seen clearly, and even they do not see all of it. What Seoul knows is this: he built his organization from nothing. He started with very little and turned it into something that now touches more parts of this city than most people realize. He controls things quietly, supply chains, properties, agreements that happen in rooms with no cameras. He has never needed to raise his voice to make an entire room comply. His name alone does that. He is 34 years old and he has not once in his adult life needed anyone's help to get somewhere he wanted to go. What Seoul suspects is that underneath all of that, there is something colder. Something more precise. A version of him that appears only when something or someone has made the mistake of crossing a line he has drawn somewhere no one else can see. Most people never encounter that version. The ones who do not talk about it openly. What only the people very close to him know, and even then, imperfectly, is that there was a woman who got past all of it. Yi-jin had not been intimidated by what he was. She had not been impressed by it either, which was rarer, and which he had not known how much he needed until she was already there. She was warm in a specific way, the kind of warmth that does not perform itself, that does not ask to be noticed. She laughed at things that were actually funny. She told him when he was wrong. She sat beside him in silence without needing to fill it, and somehow that silence always felt like the most honest conversation he'd had all week. He had been careful with her. Genuinely careful, in the way a man who has spent his whole life being reckless with everything else sometimes discovers that one thing he cannot afford to break. He had been present in ways his world would never understand or reward. He had built something with her, small and private and real, that had nothing to do with anything his name or his money had ever built before. Then she decided that a man whose name made rooms go quiet was not the life she wanted. She did not fight him about it. She did not give him a moment he could push back against. She simply said it clearly, that she needed something that felt safe in a way he could not give her, and she chose Choi Byung-soo, who was stable and ordinary and nothing like the thing she was walking away from. Kang Min-jun did not beg. He did not pursue her. He sat with the loss the way he had always sat with hard things, quietly, without showing it to anyone, waiting for the day it stopped being the first thing he thought about in the morning. When the engagement invitation arrived, his people assumed he would throw it away without reading it. They did not say this out loud, but he could see it in the way they did not comment when they handed it over. He looked at it for a long time. Then told his driver to add the venue to the evening schedule. Because showing up, composed and completely unbothered, was the only answer worth giving to an invitation that had probably been sent half hoping he would fall apart. He was not going to fall apart. He never did. The party was everything it had been designed to be. Elegant. Expensive. Every single detail executed with the kind of precision that takes months to plan and serious money to pull off. The flowers. The lighting. The music chosen carefully for each part of the evening. The staff who refilled glasses before they were empty, who removed plates before anyone noticed they were done. Everything working together to create one feeling, that the people at the center of this room were exactly as special as they believed themselves to be. Choi Byung-soo moved through it all like a man who had never once, in his entire life, done anything he needed to be ashamed of. He laughed easily. He shook hands with both of his. He listened to the older men with that particular expression of respectful attention that wealthy people love to see in younger ones. He touched Yi Jin's back gently whenever she was near him, a small, public gesture that said everything it was supposed to say. He was warm. He was charming. He was exactly the kind of man who made everyone in a room feel like they had known him for years. Adiz watched him from across the room. And thought about Amara. 3 weeks ago, Amara had sat across from her in a small office with plastic chairs and a window that didn't quite close properly, and she had told Adiz everything. She was 17. Small for her age, with eyes that had the look of someone who had been asked to carry adult weight before she was ready for it, that particular exhaustion that doesn't come from physical tiredness but from having to understand too much too soon. Her hands would not stop moving while she talked. Folding against each other. Unfolding. Pressing flat against her thighs, then rising again. She told Adiz about how Choi Byung-soo had come into their lives as an investor. He had been introduced through a church contact, someone her father trusted, someone who vouched for him without hesitation. He had been pleasant from the first meeting. Professional. He spoke about opportunities with the specific confidence of a man who had done this many times and always delivered. He listened when her father talked about the business, 15 years of careful, unglamorous work building a small fabric supply company from one market stall to something real. He told her father he could double it within 2 years. Her father believed him. In the weeks that followed, Choi Byung-soo became a regular presence. Dinners at the house. Long conversations about the future. Documents signed at the kitchen table while her mother made tea. Her father's savings, everything, the account he had been building since before Amara was born, transferred into what Choi Byung-soo called a joint investment structure. Then the small business itself, reorganized under a new company name. Then the house used as collateral for a loan Amara's father did not fully understand he was signing. Then Choi Byung-soo stopped answering calls. By the time her father contacted a lawyer, a real one, not the man Choi Byung-soo had recommended, the accounts were empty. The business had been dissolved. The loan was real and the debt was real and none of the investment documents her father had signed were worth anything at all. Everything was gone. Her father fought it for 8 months. Tried to find Choi Byung-soo. Filed reports. Talked to everyone who would listen. But a man who builds his crimes carefully across enough distance and enough paperwork is very difficult to pin down, and by the time the trail grew cold, her father had no money left to keep a lawyer and no strength left to keep fighting. His health went first. Then his will. Then, 6 months after the last account was emptied, he died. Not from one thing. From the weight of everything, accumulated and carried alone, pressing down on a man who had spent 15 years doing everything right and had still lost it all. Amara told Adiz all of this without crying. That was the part that stayed with Adiz most, not the story itself, as devastating as it was, but the way the girl told it. Dry-eyed. Careful. Like she had said it enough times in her own head that the words had finally separated from the feeling and she could deliver them one by one like items from a list. Adiz had spent 3 weeks verifying every detail. Every transaction. Every document. Every company registration, every account number, every signature. She found the trail Choi Byung-soo thought he had buried well enough. She found the shell companies, the redirected funds, the legal language designed to make everything look legitimate from the outside while being hollow at the center. She found 3 other families. Different countries. Same pattern. She had all of it in her bag. Every page. Organized and clear and undeniable. And she was standing in a room with the man who had done all of it, watching him smile and shake hands and receive a room full of warmth he had not earned, and she was waiting for exactly the right moment. The guests at the table noticed Adiz quickly. And they made a decision about her even faster, the kind of decision that happens before conscious thought catches up, the kind built from 100 small assumptions stacked together so naturally that the people making them don't realize they're building anything at all. The comments started in Korean. Casual. Light. Spoken without any particular lowering of voices, because the people saying them had already decided she could not understand them, and that confidence made them careless. A woman in a silver dress leaned toward the man beside her and said, with a small smile, that Kang Min-jun had evidently updated his standards significantly. The man beside her covered his mouth and laughed quietly. Someone else, a man in his 40s with the look of someone who had spent a long time being the most important person in whatever room he was in, remarked loudly enough for the surrounding chairs to hear that he genuinely could not understand what she was even doing at this particular event. More laughter. Easy, uncomplicated laughter. The laughter of people who felt completely safe. Then the comments shifted. Still in Korean. Still casual. Still wearing the relaxed tone of people who believed they were having a private conversation in a crowded room. They moved on to Kang Min-jun himself. How remarkable it was, someone said, that the great Kang Min-jun had come in person to watch his former girlfriend get engaged. What composure, said another, admiringly and mockingly in the same breath. What discipline it must take to sit there looking unbothered while your ex walks through the room on another man's arm. And then, quieter, more pointed, even the most feared man in Seoul, it seemed, could not hold on to one woman. Nobody said it directly to him. Nobody looked at him when they said it. Because saying it to his face, even here, even surrounded by witnesses and expensive lighting and the social protection of an engagement party, was a different category of risk entirely. The kind of risk that had no guaranteed end point. The kind you do not take unless you are certain, completely certain, that nothing can reach you afterward. So they used Adiz instead. As cover. As the soft place to land all the words they could not say directly. As the safest possible way to say what they meant without having to be the ones who said it. Adiz sat through all of it. Still. Glass in her hand. Eyes moving occasionally, not frantically, not anxiously, but with that slow, precise attention of someone who is listening to everything and filing it all away. She was not looking at the table. She was looking at Choi Byung-soo at the front of the room. Beside her, Kang Min-jun did not move. His face did not change. His expression remained exactly what it had been when he walked in, composed, present, and entirely unreadable. But his eyes moved. Slowly. Without hurry. One by one, he found the faces of the people who were laughing. He did not say anything to them. He did not need to. One by one, they found something else to look at. The table grew slightly quieter after that. Not silent, that would have required an acknowledgement nobody was willing to make, but the specific kind of quiet that falls when a room remembers, all at once, who it is actually sitting near. The host announced that it was time for guests to share words for the happy couple. This was the part of the evening that required a particular kind of performance, the warm toast, the polished memory, the story that made Yi-jin laugh and Choi Byung-soo look humble and the room feel like it was witnessing something genuine. The microphone began making its way around the tables, passed from hand to willing hand, and person after person stood and delivered exactly what the moment called for. Warm. Practiced. Perfectly timed. The microphone reached a table near the front, and a man stood and spoke lovingly about Choi Byung-soo's integrity, how honest he was, how dependable, how a man like that was exactly the partner a woman like Yi-jin deserved. Applause followed. Yi-jin touched her chest. Choi Byung-soo smiled. Eventually the microphone made it back toward the middle of the room. And then the man at the table, the one in his 40s who had been the most comfortable with the jokes earlier, picked it up. Looked at it. Then, with the expression of someone who had just thought of something deeply amusing, turned and held it out toward Adiz. With an exaggerated smile. An offering. The kind that is not really an offering at all. The table caught on immediately. Laughter started before she had even moved, anticipatory laughter, the kind that is already responding to the punchline before it happens, because the punchline was assumed to be simple. She would look confused, or shake her head, or reach for the microphone and produce nothing useful, and the whole table would have one more small, comfortable thing to feel superior about before the evening continued. Adiz set down her glass. She stood up. She took the microphone. The laughter continued for exactly 3 more seconds. Then it stopped. Because she began to speak in Korean. Not halting Korean. Not accented, careful, effortful Korean. Fluent, clear, unhurried Korean, every syllable placed with the kind of precision that comes from years, not months, not weeks. The kind of fluency that could only have come from someone who had sat inside the language long enough for it to stop feeling foreign. The room did not just go quiet. It went completely, physically still. Like someone had reached into the air and removed all the movement from it at once. Adiz stood with the microphone and did not look at anyone's expression of shock. She did not acknowledge the table beside her. She did not pause to enjoy the silence, though she had earned the right to. She began by congratulating Yi-jin warmly, sincerely, looking at her directly as she spoke, because Yi-jin had done nothing wrong, and Adiz was a precise woman who aimed at only what she intended to hit. Then she turned to Choi Byung-soo. And she told the room about a family. She told them about a man who had spent 15 years building something small and real, a fabric business, nothing grand, nothing glamorous, just a man's honest work repeated every day for 15 years until it became something his daughter could be proud of. She told them about a 17-year-old girl who watched everything that business represented disappear across the span of a few weeks. She did not rush this part. She let the room sit with the image of the girl, 17, watching, unable to do anything to stop it. Then she told them about the investor. The man who came with documents and confidence and a warm handshake. The man who reorganized everything, moved the money, used the house as collateral, and then, simply, stopped answering. She described the debt. The failed legal attempt. The months of fighting. The health that broke under a weight that was never supposed to be there. The father who died. She told it the way truth sounds when it has been carefully carried for a long time and is finally, carefully, being set down. Not dramatically. Not with tears or a raised voice or any of the theatrical tools that can sometimes make people dismiss a story as performance. Just the facts. Delivered in the language of the room she was standing in. Given to every person present whether they wanted to receive them or not. Then she reached into her bag. Pulled out the folder. Held it up so the room could see it clearly. Every transaction, she said. Every signature. Every account number. Every transfer. Every company name. She looked directly at Choi Byung-soo. All of it leads here. All of it leads to this room. All of it leads to you. She set the microphone down on the table. The room erupted. Not with applause, with the particular chaos of a space where something irreversible has just been said. Voices rising. Chairs shifting. Heads turning toward Choi Byung-soo, toward Yi Jin, toward the documents, toward each other. Choi Byung-soo moved through the crowd toward her immediately. His face had changed completely. The warmth was gone. The polish was gone. What was underneath, tight, furious, frightened in a way that expressed itself as aggression, was now entirely visible. His hand reached toward the microphone. His mouth was already forming the words he intended to use to undo what she had just done. He did not reach it. Kang Min-jun stood up. He placed himself between Choi Byung-soo and Adiz in one calm, unhurried movement. Not grabbing. Not blocking with his hands. Just, standing there, in the specific space that made the next step impossible. He did not touch Choi Byung-soo. He did not raise his hands or his voice or produce anything that could be described later as a threat. He simply looked at him. With the particular stillness of a man who has never once, in 34 years of building something that required a certain kind of people to respect him, needed to explain what he was capable of. Choi Byung-soo stopped. His hand dropped. He was close enough to see Kang Min-jun's eyes clearly, and whatever he found there was enough to make the body make its own decision before the mind finished arguing. The room held its breath. Not one person spoke. Not the host. Not the staff. Not the guests who had been watching and whispering and moving since Adiz started talking. The whole venue was suspended, waiting, still, the way a room waits when it understands that something is happening that it cannot afford to miss. Kang Min-jun held Choi Byung-soo's gaze for one long, unhurried moment. Then he turned away. He picked up the microphone. Straightened it in his hand once. And spoke. Quietly. No raised voice. No performance. Speaking to every person in that room the way a man speaks when he does not need anything from them and therefore has no reason to be anything other than completely honest. He said he had come tonight because he received an invitation. He said he came because he was not a man who avoided uncomfortable rooms. He said both of these things without apology and without bitterness, just plainly, as simple facts. Then he looked at Choi Byung-soo. A man who builds his life on top of other people's losses, he said. He paused. Not for effect. For the word itself to land where it was meant to land. Is not a man who deserves a room like this. He set the microphone down on the table. He buttoned the front of his jacket. And he walked toward the exit. The room did not make a sound. Not while he was walking. Not while he reached the door. Not until after he had already passed through it. Adiz picked up her bag. She lifted the folder from the table where she had set it, and placed it back down, open, in the center where every person sitting nearby could see exactly what was inside. Then she followed him out. Behind them, the room found its voice again. Slowly at first. One person to the next. Then faster. Then all at once, the way a fire catches when it finally reaches the material it was always going to burn. The whispers turned into questions. The questions turned into conversations. The conversations turned into something that would not stop, not that night, not the next morning, not for a long time after that. Outside, the night air was clean and cold. Seoul moved the way it always moved, loud, lit, relentless, the city going about its business with the complete indifference it reserved for everything that happened inside buildings while it kept running outside them. Headlights swept past. Music drifted from somewhere down the street. The evening was going on exactly as it had before, because that is the thing about nights that feel enormous from the inside, the world outside does not feel them at all. The two of them stood on the steps. Just that. Just two people in the cold air, the venue door behind them, the city in front of them. Kang Min-jun turned to look at her. For a moment, he simply looked, the way a person looks when they are seeing something clearly for the first time and are taking the time to make sure they have it right. How long were you planning that? He asked. 3 weeks, she said. Alone? She met his eyes. Always alone. He was quiet for a moment. Something moved across his face, too quick to name, gone before it could settle into any recognizable shape. I want to do something for you, he said. She tilted her head slightly. He continued. You saved me from walking into that room and becoming the story everyone told afterward. He said it directly, without dressing it up, the way someone speaks when they have decided honesty is more useful than pride. Name something. Anything reasonable. Consider it done. Adiz looked at him for a moment. She shook her head. I didn't do it for you, she said simply. Her voice was not cold. It was just honest, with the specific, clean quality of a person who has never needed their honesty to be softer than it is. I did it for a 17-year-old girl who lost her father. I did it because a man who does what he did to that family does not get to stand in a beautiful room receiving gifts and good wishes while she sits somewhere carrying all of it alone. She adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. You just happened to be standing at the door. She started down the steps. He watched her go. 1 step. 2. Her footsteps steady on the stone, not hurrying, not performing her exit for anyone. Just going, the way she had come, with a purpose that had nothing to do with him and did not ask him for anything. Kang Min-jun stood on those steps and felt something he had not felt in a long time. He was a man who always had something to say. Always had the next move mapped, the next word ready, the next position prepared so far in advance that silence in a conversation was almost never something that happened to him, it was something he used deliberately, as a tool. But right now, he had nothing. She had walked away from him, not cruelly, not dramatically, not to make a point, and he had absolutely nothing to offer into the space she left behind.